My glasses. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mighty Blaze, where I have the great privilege of interviewing my friend Susie Orman Schnall today about her, on her pub day. Thank you for coming on the Blaze on your pub day for We Came Here to Shine. If you would be so kind as to hold up your beautiful book cover so we can see it. I love this. I love this cover. Love the book. Love Susie. So excited for all of this. I should say I'm Jenna Blum. I'm the co-founder of The Blaze and the producer. Usually I sit behind the scenes in my yoga pants, but today I put a top to make the yoga pants look better so that I could talk to Susie and honor her on her pub day. So Susie, welcome. Welcome to The Blaze.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here, so honored, and just so appreciative of what you are doing with The Blaze. And Caroline is so amazing, and you guys kind of like swooped in and saved all the authors, and just so grateful. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yes, Caroline Levitt is my co-founder. She's amazing. And we have a team of 18 creative volunteers, which is also just ridiculously amazing. Everybody who works there took us off, as my agent would say. So I think I'm going to give you your formal introduction and then ask questions about many things, the book, your wallpaper, and your study, which I'm obsessed with. So get ready. Susie, I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. Susie Orman Schnall is the author of 4 novels. Her debut, On Grace, is about turning 40, which obviously you've not experienced yet, so that should be fiction, really. The Balance Project, about work-life balance, which I would love to know more about, especially in the age of COVID, which was inspired by the Balance Project interview series that Susie started in 2014. The Subway Girls, which is your first historical fiction, right, which I also loved, from St. Martin's Press, about the fascinating Miss Subways advertising program. And you actually talked to a lot of the IRL Miss Subways, and I've been following Susie on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, watching her talk to all of these ladies, which is so amazing. You should totally do this. And finally, last but beginning a new chapter, We Came Here to Shine, also historical fiction, set at the 1939 New York City World's Fair. And I think it's also a book about strong women in men's worlds, which is, I feel, so timely. So in your own words, can you tell us a little bit about what We Came Here to Shine is all about?
Yes, so We Came Here to Shine is uplifting historical fiction set at the 1939 New York World's Fair. And it is about 2 main characters, Vivi, who is a Hollywood actress who comes to the World's Fair to swim in the Aquacade, which was a synchronized swimming spectacular production, and Max, who is a journalist who works at the newspaper called Today at the Fair, which was the publication, the daily publication at the World's Fair. And so the story follows these 2 women as they pursue their personal and professional dreams, all the obstacles that they face, they end up meeting each other, and it's all set against the iconic and extraordinary World's Fair, with a complete behind the scenes look at the fair for the readers.
Thank you. You know that I have to ask you about, the reason I made this face about Max is that when we're first introduced to Max as a journalist, she's in a class, a journalism class, and they're being handed out their assignments for various newspapers, and she really wants to work at the New York Times, which is like, every journalist high bar. And then she gets sent to Today at the Fair, which seems like such a demotion, but it opens up this whole new world for her. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came up with these 2 women and the idea behind the novel, or the idea for the novel?
Yes, and I'm gonna grab some props.
Oh, good. Oh my gosh. Are there puppets?
No, there's no puppets, unfortunately.
No, I'm scared of puppets. That's good.
Books, and sometimes books are better than puppets.
I personally am scared of puppets and clowns, but not books. So thank God, no puppets.
Good, and this won't be scary. So this is Esther Williams' autobiography, The $1 Million Mermaid. And Esther Williams was a famous swimmer who swam in many movies, but before that, she swam. So I was reading, let me start from the beginning. I was reading this autobiography, and there came a part where Esther Williams is talking about swimming in the 1940s, in the Aquacade at the 1940s Golden Gate Exposition, which was the San Francisco World's Fair. And I'm reading that, I'm like, Aquacade, what is an aquacade? So of course I had to go to the Google and look up aquacade and found out that it was this huge multi-million-dollar production that was originally staged in 1937 at the St. Louis World's Fair, but then it went in 1939 to the New York World's Fair, and it was the highest grossing attraction at the World's Fair, and it sat 10,000 people, 4 shows a day, 100 swimmers, 100 dancers, this huge thing. And I became captivated by it and thought that it would be a really great place to drop a character, not only in the aquacade, but at the World's Fair. But then I realized that I needed another character to kind of play counterpoint to Vivi, who was my Hollywood actress. And it's a long story, so I'll make it short. I wrote a different book that had a journalist as the main character, and that book is no longer going to be a book. But I had done a lot of research using this book, which is called Women in American Journalism.
I had to put my glasses on again. I'm like, oh yeah.
Jan Witt. But even more exciting, sorry to Jan Witt, but this book called The Good Girls Revolt by Lynn Povich. And this is the book that inspired the TV show on Amazon called Good Girls Revolt, that is so good and only lasted 1 season because of a sexist Amazon executive. But so I decided, okay, I'm gonna make my second character a journalist at the World's Fair, and I had to figure out how to do that, and maybe she was working for another newspaper and was covering the World's Fair. But then through my research, I found this.
Oh my God.
This, which I bought on eBay, I have 2 copies. This is an actual copy of Today at the Fair. So Today at the Fair was an actual daily newspaper. It was tabloid size. At the World's Fair, it was 8 pages. Yeah, 8 pages every single day, 5 cents. And I was so excited because now I had a reason to make my main character a journalist at the fair. So that's how I came up with these 2 characters.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I love seeing the sepia newspapers. Are they sort of crumbling under your
Very
feet?
much so. Yeah, they're very ripped, and I'm trying to be careful with them, but I also I like touching them and reading through them and flipping through them. So
Did you get them from the same buyer on eBay?
I have a ton of memorabilia I got from all different buyers. I bought this charm bracelet. Can you see it? And actually there's a charm bracelet in my book, and it's inspired by this one. And I have little pins from the World's Fair. So I bought some really fun things.
Fantastic. I'm so glad I'm not the only writer who does this. When I was working on The Lost Family, there is a scene in it from Brigham's ice cream parlor, which doesn't exist anymore, except in Duluth, Minnesota, there's one. And they had this dessert, like an ice cream dessert with 27 different scoops of ice cream called the Lollapalooza. And if you could eat the whole thing in one sitting, you would get a pin of a sick looking little cartoon character with X's for eyes that said, I ate a whole Lollapalooza. And I spent a good rabbit hole, 3 days hunting down this pin on eBay, and I finally found it, and it became like my good luck charm, and I sort of put it in the book, and it gets stitched into various scenes. So I love this sort of confluence between research and life. Like, can you talk a little bit more about the exquisite, like as I imagine it, the exquisite and luscious research you did for this book with the fair? I mean, so fun, right?
Yes, it was so much fun. It was really my favorite part. I loved doing the research for it. I spent more time doing the research than I did writing the book. I started with the internet, reading old newspaper magazine articles. There's also an amazing website, and I link to all of this from my website, but it's called 1939nyworldsfair.com. And it's so comprehensive and it's so robust, and there's articles about every single thing. I have a load of books about the World's Fair. I mean, here's one, for example, The World of Tomorrow. I have a bunch of these types of books, and they're so long. You can see all of my highlights in my yellow tabs. I even bought off of eBay the actual official guidebook from the World's Fair that's like completely breaking on the spine. But so I was able to really go deep into all of the exhibits and everything. As I said, I bought some memorabilia. I also went to the World's Fair was in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, Queens. And it was set on basically a trash dump that was cleared starting in 1936 for the fair to open in 1939. So that is right now what's there is Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, Queens, but people might know it because it's where the Arthur Ashe Tennis Stadium is that the US Open is played at. And it's also where City Field is that the Mets play at is all right around that area. So the fair was 1939 to 1940. Then it was all torn down because it was only meant to be for that season. And then there was also a fair there from 1964 to 1965, which most of the buildings there were torn down, but the grounds are there and are the same. So the pathways where the characters were and where some of the different exhibits were are still there. So I was able to go, it was a long way of saying that, sorry. I was able to go and have a tour and be able to walk like where my characters would have walked because they worked on opposite sides of the fairgrounds. And so that was really exciting to get to be in the presence of where people were for the fair.
Could you, and don't apologize for the quote long answer, like this is the good stuff, like this is what we want to know. Did you feel like when you were there, you could feel your characters? Could you almost like punch through the time between now and then and get into the fair? Or were you sort of like looking for ghosts?
Yeah, no, I was so in awe the whole time. I just was like, I was just sucking it up like a sponge, that I didn't really think about it like that. And the book was already written once I got to go, because I wrote the book in the winter and I got this tour guide in the spring. But so it was just like, I was giddy kind of imagining them, but I didn't necessarily feel them, but I was excited for them, you know, that this is what they got to experience.
You sort of second guessed my next question, which was, when do you do your research for the book? Like when I research a book, I spend a good 3 to 6 months immersing in the research to sort of teach it to myself. And then I write that, as you know, Bob, first draft, where the characters are all saying things like, as you know, Bob, the first World Fair is set in Flushing Meadows in 1939. And then you sort of go back and smooth through the story. But if you'd already written the novel.
Yeah. So that, sorry.
No, that's fine.
That tour was the only thing I did afterwards. So all of this other research I did before I started writing the book. And then, as you know, while you're writing the book, because my first draft, I might be like, I might have my characters go somewhere that I hadn't fully done the research about a particular exhibit. And then I'll spend 2 days reading all about this exhibit so that I could insert one sentence into the novel so that it's accurate and authentic.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, the research is like a shrinky dink, where you have like this massive, or the Hemingway's iceberg thing, I guess, is a more elegant, less 70s way to put it. But when readers read a book, they don't always know, and they shouldn't know, that like one sentence of research actually rests on a whole mountain, a whole iceberg that's under the water of like, weeks of research that the author did, which is so cool. Did you find out anything that surprised you during the tour that changed the course of the book at all?
Not necessarily during the tour, definitely doing the research. I mean, it was just, it was more that I had to figure out what I wasn't going to include in the book, because I didn't want to make the book too expository, and I also didn't want to make it too long. I definitely wanted to stick to it being a story set at the World's Fair rather than a story about the World's Fair, if you know what I mean. So it was just a matter of trying to figure out what I wanted to include, which was always hard because, you want to include everything. You want to give everything its time to shine.
Totally. And tell me that you swam underwater, like wearing lipstick in an Esther Williams kind of way.
I should have, and I actually wanted to I looked up, because there are lessons in my area about synchronized swimming. They teach it, but it's amazing. I spent so much time watching videos of women swimming in the aquacade and also doing Olympic synchronized swimming. And the Aqua Lilies, who are a current synchronized swimming team who do parties, like they were in the movie Hail Caesar, where Scarlett Johansson acts as Esther Williams, basically. So it's so much fun watching, and it's so hard what they do, the strength that is required to do that. And one of the things that Esther Williams, what's interesting about her story is that when she auditioned for Billy Rose, she was 19 years old and she had been a competitive swimmer, and she was trying to impress him in her audition. So she jumped into the pool and she swam really fast. And he said, "No, I want you to swim pretty." And that is kind of like the whole model of, they had to keep their necks out and they had to smile, and it wasn't meant to be athletic. Audiences didn't want to see girls necessarily being athletic. They wanted them to swim pretty.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine keeping my eyes open underwater. I mean, I used to try that when I was a kid, diving to the bottom of my grandparents' pool, you know, to pick up like a penny, but it would sting. So I mean, just the stamina of the athleticism and the grace and doing everything underwater, which adds pressure to your body. I mean, I imagine these girls were in fantastic shape.
Yeah, and there isn't that much about kind of the training that they had to do, but you can just see through the choreography and all that. And the pool was cold when they first started swimming. The Billy Rose, the producer, so he was the guy who created the Aquacade. He was a huge Broadway producer, impresario type guy. So he had a lot of money. He had productions, and he had to increase the heating system because the spring in New York City in 1939 was very cold. And so he had to make the pool warmer so the swimmers could be in it. And I incorporate all of that into the book.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember thinking in a sort of contemporary way about Twister. Like we watch the movies and we see people performing feats on screen and don't realize that in that movie, Helen Hunt is being pelted by ice cubes from an ice machine, and that these girls are swimming in ice cold pools with their unmeltable lipstick. Of course, I want to know, like, what all of us want to know, what kind of lipstick they had that didn't get messed up underwater, which we all need. And then, do you have that lipstick? And we have synchronized swimming at your launch, because you know, if we'd had a non-COVID launch, you would have had synchronized swimmers.
Yes, I would have hired the Aqua Lilies. I'm featuring every Thursday now. I did little mini interviews with them to celebrate the sport and of synchronized swimming. So every Thursday on my Instagram, I feature a different Lily who I interview about her life, because these women all have lives in addition to their synchronized swimming. So yeah, no, it was amazing. And it's all in the book, these rituals that the swimmers took, what they had to put on their hair and the Vaseline. And think about not only having to do the ritual every day of doing that, but then removing it, and the face and the type of powder that they had to use and the lipstick that they had to use. And now obviously technology has made cosmetics better for that sort of thing. But it's really interesting because they didn't wear swim caps through the entire performance, only for part. So
that's so crazy. I remember actually having to wear a swimming cap when I was a kid, and I hated it. I was like, it's squeezing my head, you know, but they weren't glamorous swim caps either that you have like in the synchronized swimming. I love learning about this stuff. Thank you so much. So we had a reader ask, how did you get interested in Esther Williams in the first place? Because you said the book sort of bloomed out of this biography you were reading. And when you held it up, I thought, yes, she was reading about Esther Williams, as one does. You know, I mean, were you actively looking for historical subjects to write about, or just interested?
So I have no idea. I think what happened was, because I read this book, I looked it up the other day. I ordered this book in 2016 and I wrote this book in 2019. So there was something that I think I might have read an obituary, and I don't know if it was for Esther Williams herself. It might have been for Eleanor Holm. It was somebody, it was something. Or else it might have been that this was offered as a BookBub discount for the ebook, and I read about it and I thought, oh, that's an interesting book and I want to read the hard copy of it. So I'm not entirely sure how I became interested. It might have also been that I should have a better answer for this, but I live in a part of New York in Westchester County, where right near Rye Playland, and people might know Rye Playland because it's where Tom Hanks's character went when he in Big, the boardwalk. So, and there is a historic Art Deco pool at Playland. And so I get the Rye newspaper, and there's so much interesting history about the Rye Playland pool. And I started doing research on that to do a book, because the book that I wrote right before this, that isn't happening, was set at Rye Playland with kind of a revival of the Aquacade. And so I started becoming interested in synchronized swimming. And I think that's where I started learning about Esther Williams. So I bought this book to do research on it. And then that turned me on to the Aquacade.
Got it. Thank you.
Sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I love it.
Such a good book. It's so juicy. It's so good. And she was ahead of her time. I mean, she was a real vocal and stood up for herself woman.
Which is what Vivi is like also in the novel. And both of your female characters are so strong. I'm sort of sensing the theme of, I know you interviewed Miss Subways, and now you're interviewing the water lilies, the lilies. And I have said this before, but I really encourage everybody to follow Susie on her Instagram, because I didn't know that the lilies were on there, but I just follow you anyway. And I think it's so great to include that real life component of people who the characters in the book are sort of loosely based on, or the people who taught you about those characters, because it's like a magic nexus when you have like real life interlocking with fiction like that. So everybody go look at the Lilies. But I wanted to know, when you were interviewing or just hanging out with Miss Subways for Subway Girls, or after Subway Girls, and also the Lilies, what do you think is sort of the shift in position, if there is one, from women then to women now? Like, because they're both sort of World War II era-ish books. Is there more of a commonality among women then and now, or do you think there's a sort of a shift in how women perceive themselves?
Yeah, I think women have always wanted more than what they've been told they can have.
Mm.
And I think what's different is that more women listened to what society was telling them they were allowed to want back then. And so there were always women who defied the expectations and burst out of the boxes that were built around them. If you think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's the exact same age as my Miss Subway's characters. So yeah, so there were women who were willing to, and who knows what they were taught by their family, or what sort of, how it was that they were programmed differently. But I just think obviously now we are given more permission. And I still think that we are programmed, we're sent a memo, as Glennon Doyle likes to say, when we're, through the media, through society, through our families, of what the expectations are for a girl and for a woman and for a mother, and how to be a good woman and be a good mother and the right type of employee. And I just think that everything is up for negotiation at this point. Our world is being shattered and being put back together. And we are living in a fascinating time. And some people say, yeah, but now we have every opportunity available to us and we're still expected. I heard, blanking on her name right now, the woman who wrote the article for The Atlantic about why women can't have it all. She was in government. I'm blanking. Somebody will put it in the Facebook. And she said, we're expected to now do the jobs that our fathers did, while also still doing the jobs that our mothers did. And so I think it's complicated for women. And I think we're trying to negotiate that reality. And it's hard. And, but the fact that we are able to is what's the most monumental about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I know that you wear all of these hats. Like, you have a career that, I grew up with a dad who was a writer, so I always considered writing to be a masculine career just by modeling. But I had a mom who was a feminist, but she was a frustrated feminist, sort of trapped at home as a housewife. So I grew up with a lot of interesting sort of messaging in the Free to Be You and Me era. Like, that was the record that I listened to obsessively as a little girl in my Oshkosh. My mom would not let me wear princess things. I had to wear my Oshkosh. I had to play with dump trucks. I couldn't play with dolls. And I actually didn't like dolls anyway, right? So, but I was like, all I wanted to do is grow up and be a writer like my dad. And then I had a mom who was like really unhappy doing houseworky stuff. But I also really like doing houseworky stuff. Like, I like to bake, and I like actually really like cleaning, like a little bit way too much. It's one of my procrastination things. I don't have kids. I know you do have children, and you have this career, and you also are super athletic. Like, I see you. Like, I see what you do in your workouts. I'm like, oh my God, she's like jumping up on this thing that's like 8 feet tall. She's like Superwoman. How do you balance all of this? And do you feel like, what messaging were you given as a little girl that helped you become this person who can do all of these things?
Well, I'm still becoming, I will say that. And it's Anne Marie Slaughter. It came to me. Anne Marie Slaughter is the writer who wrote about that. I think it's all, I'm just learning it all still. And I think that it's all about phases in life. Like right now, my kids are all teenagers. One's in college, 2 are in high school. And I have all the time in the world now, because not only do they go to school all day, one of them doesn't live with me, and they don't really want to have anything to do with me when they are home anyway. So I have time. And I stopped working full time when I did have my first son, who's now 19. And I was a stay-at-home mom until I started writing freelance and then started writing fiction. So I've always, but the reason that I started the Balance Project interview series that predated the Balance Project novel was because I was really struggling. I was trying to figure out how to be the type of mother that felt right for me while also having the type of job and being the type of professional that also lit me up and made me feel fulfilled, because I needed both. And so I started asking women who I knew who had jobs that I admired, who had children who looked clean. And I thought, well, they must have the secret. They must know how to do this. And what was interesting is at the end of the entire process, which I interviewed 175 women for the Balance Project, and all of those interviews are up on my website, is that I thought I would find out how women are doing it all. But what I found out instead was that nobody is doing it all, and everybody is making sacrifices. And that was so liberating for me, and gave me permission, in a sense, to not feel like I needed to do it all also. And women were really authentic and honest in my interviews. That was the culture of the interviews, in that I didn't want people to burnish some superwoman image. I wanted them to be really honest and gritty and say what's hard and what they don't have time to do. And it's impossible to be to be the type of friend and mother and volunteer and professional all at a sustainable level all the time. Something's got to give. And it's only when we acknowledge that, first of all, and when we stop comparing ourselves to other people. Because I used to be like, why can't I do everything that Sheryl Sandberg does? She looks like she's got it all going on. But Sheryl Sandberg is different than me. I get overwhelmed by too much on my plate, and maybe she doesn't. So I learned so much through that interview series. Every time I coded an interview, I took a deep breath, because I was like, okay, more validation, more verification that women are struggling. And so luckily, I think since I did those interviews, which started in 2014, the conversation has changed. It has evolved so much. I feel like there's not as much pressure on women. The whole question of balance, right, has been thrown back. So anyway, it's interesting to see it all evolve.
It is, and I'm so glad that you mentioned the Balance Project, and I encourage everybody to check this out as well. But I feel like it's very uncorseting to realize that you can do everything, actually. And I remember this being like a big thing in like my late 20s and early 30s. That was when the superwoman, like the Wonder Woman thing, was really, we can have children, we can have careers with it, and you were expected to. Then that was like the bar you were supposed to hit, which is so damaging. And then people were burning out, women were burning out so quickly. And I feel as though, yes, you can do it all, but you can't do it all well, or you can't do it all perfectly. Like that to me seems like the takeaway from the Balance Project, and also just from life, right? Like, so, and in a very limited way, like I have a baby puppy this week who's 12 weeks old, and I'm like running around the house after him and trying to get on that schedule. And I also started a small company, sort of inadvertently, like the Blaze. And I realized that when I was working the Blaze in the first days, there were things I had to let go just to make sure that the company flame was still being tended. And then when you get the puppy, I'm like, I can do that in the Blaze, but I cannot do anything else. So I have to let go of something else, and I'm teaching. And so I think that women's lives are very mosaic, and the pieces slide around a lot. And what I have been thinking, especially in the past couple of weeks, when I have like the puppy on one hand, like peeing down my arm and being cute and like eating my hair, and on the other hand, I'm like typing and whatever, is that I can do these things, but I might not do them to my own standard, or the standard that I would wish, but they're still getting done, and that's okay. And to assume some sort of forgiveness for not doing everything perfectly, I think that is a sort of a liberating thing.
Yes. And I think, yeah, definitely. And I have ascribed very much now. I used to think of myself as a perfectionist, and now I realize that that is such a waste of time, and I'm fully on the good enough board. And I think I heard it on Oprah once, that she was talking about that you can have 3 main priorities in your life, and you have to pick what they are. And then every opportunity that comes towards you, you have to funnel through those. So for instance, mine are my family, which includes my marriage and my children. It's my health and wellness, sleeping, eating well, exercising, and it's my career. And so what's left out of that are things like friendships and philanthropy. Not that I don't volunteer or get involved in philanthropy, and not that I don't have friendships, but you can't do all of those things. Samantha Edis talks about it as pieces of a pie. You have all of these different pieces of a pie, but they can't all have the priority every single day. And that's something else I talk about with the Balance Project, is that you don't have to do all of them well. You don't have to be spectacular at everything every single day. And I've also gotten so good at saying no. Just because somebody asks me something, that's the priority for them. It doesn't have to mean it's my priority right now. And I could do that committee some other day. And now I'm going to gracefully say no, because I won't be able to give you the time that it deserves. And I need to give myself some downtime and some white space. And that's important to me, being able to thrive in the things that I've made a priority for this particular time of my life.
Right. And it's fluid, and then chapters change. So maybe as your kids need you less, then there's more room to invite friends back in. Or I find, I mean, I know this comes from a place of extreme privilege, but the reason I kept saying yes to things is that they were all awesome things. You know, that if you're like, oh, I get to do this for charity, or somebody would say, can you come speak here? I'd be like, yes, of course I can. Or, you know, just like, you just want to give back, and you want to do every good thing that comes your way, like a sort of like Pac-Man. I'm like gobbling up all this stuff. And then I would realize that what my pattern was I would say yes and then have to back out, which is much worse for me and for the other people than just saying, I'm so sorry, I'm really overwhelmed right now, I can't do that. So okay, so I'm going to get off this track. I could talk to you about this forever. I totally love this, but I want to get back to we came here to shine. And also so I'm obsessed with two things right now in my immediate like blinkered view. And one, it's the wallpaper in your study, which I am like super in love with and need to know where it came from. And the other is the book cover. So can we talk about that first?
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind holding it up again. I love this cover. Like, I think it's beautiful and I think it's memorable. And so was this the first cover that you had? Do you love it? Like, give us the honest scoop.
Do you want the tea, Jenna? You want the
I want the tea. I want the tea.
Okay.
Spill it, baby. Spill it.
I'm lucky in that my publisher included me in the process, and I was able to help. I was able to get the cover treatments and say, yes, I love it, or no, I don't. And this went through many rounds. And I am not an author who is going to have access to custom photography or custom art. Some authors will get that for their books, but I am a stock photo level author. And so, but I kept getting pictures of the publisher. I feel really badly, but.
No. Okay, we should just like quantify this by saying that it's a process.
It's like, a process. And so the women that they were sending me covers of, they just weren't right. They had the wrong hairstyles for the era. Or they were wearing wool suits, and this was a summer, and just, it went through a lot of rounds, and it got to the point where I wasn't seeing what I envisioned. And so I went on to the New York Public Library Photographic Archives, because they have a huge archive of tens of thousands of photographs from the World's Fair. And I found this picture in black and white, and I mocked up the cover on Canva, and I sent it to my publisher, and they loved the picture too. And then they obviously colorized it and gave it the full graphic design treatment, because I am not a graphic designer. And I love it so much. So yes, it makes me very happy to look at, because these women embody the joy that I want the story to hold. So these are not aquacade swimmers, and this pool that they're in right now is more of a reflecting pool in the middle of the fair. This wasn't in the amusement zone where the aquacade was held. So this is a marketing photograph. These aren't necessarily, I don't know if they're not aquacade swimmers, but I don't think that they are. I think these are just models who were doing a marketing shot for the fair. But yes, I love it. I love the colors. It makes me so happy, and it's been fun. I did a little treatment people can see on my Instagram where I gave them little comic bubbles today to announce the launch.
I totally, they're like, yay, it's pub day, hooray. So I mean, I'm waiting, like, as you go through your virtual tour, I'm expecting all those bubbles to change like every day, and the ladies will be saying different things like, oh, time for pie, or oh, you know.
Well, I have another interesting story too, which is that I commissioned a custom map for this book. So it was very important for me to include a map in the book, because to orient the readers, the fair was 1,200 acres, and it comprised hundreds of buildings. And one of my characters' jobs was right here. This is Max at the administration building, and Vivi is over here far clear on the other side of the fair. And so I wanted my characters to be, my readers to be able to see where they were. Now, this is an example. This was included free in copies of the New Yorker. This is an actual map I got off of eBay. So this is what maps look like. And there's just too many buildings, and I wouldn't have been able to include this whole index in the book. So I commissioned an illustrator. It turns out she's from Italy, and we worked together on this custom map on the wayfinding and all of the locations to put in. But I've had readers tell me that they actually keep referring back to the map to see where the different things are, that they went for dinner here at the Italian pavilion, and this is the Trilon and the Paris Sphere. So it's a really cool thing. And I include the story on the behind the scenes making of the map also on my website.
That's so amazing. It adds such dimension and texture, I think, when you have sort of multimedia components to a book. Like my last book had menus in it and faux newspaper articles that I had written, but the publisher super kindly formatted it like newspaper articles. And when I first got the first pass pages, which are the ones that you look at to sort of proofread, and I was surprised to see the menu in there and the newspaper articles. And I was in a cupcake shop going through, the first pass pages, and I started to cry because it made the world in my mind so tangible to see this in the same way that the map does. There's like the next table taking her child away from me and being like, there's a crying lady, like don't talk to her, don't give her your cupcake, but I think that's so great. You love this book, don't you?
I do. I love it. Thank you. I guess I just love all the different layers of it, and there are a lot of layers, and I think that the history is fascinating. And I think what else I love is that people who got advanced copies of it are really responding to it, and the reviews that I'm reading and the comments that people are emailing me are that it landed the way that I hoped it would. It landed better than I imagined it could. So I guess that's what I'm really excited about.
Tell me your favorite comment so far, and if you have gotten one from the Lilies that you especially like, I would like to hear that too.
So my favorite comment so far, and I think it was Jane Healy who said it, and if I get this wrong, I'm gonna feel so badly, but I think she's the one who said that the fair is a third character. And just like how they used to talk about in Sex and the City that New York City was the fifth character, I love that she recognized that the fair is the third character, and now I use that whenever I talk about it, because it really, really is. And I love giving dimension to the fair in that way. And the Lilies they haven't read the book yet. We just sent them copies of the book, so they haven't read it. But I know that my Miss Subway's women who read the book, and I leave Easter eggs in all of my books. So for people who read On Grace, when they get to the Balance Project, there's something from On Grace in there. And when they read Miss Subways, there's something from the Balance Project in there. And We Came Here to Shine, there's a little Miss Subways in here. So, and I just on Facebook today was communicating with the woman who's Miss Subways, who is a Miss Subways, and she's in this book. And so I know she commented on my Facebook page, and it's so cool. I'm like, you're in this book. And so,
oh my gosh, I'm totally going to your page now to pick her out, to see if I can pick her out and see who she is. I love the idea of the Easter eggs, because I try to bury like one splinter of each book in the subsequent books, but I didn't know they were called that, and that's so charming. I leave Easter eggs that I'm really bad with names, so I tend to use people I know as placeholders. I put their names in the books, and then the last book I forgot to change them, and so people were reading the book and they were like, okay, so now I'm a newspaper reporter, or I'm an art dealer, or whatever. And they were all over Twitter, and I was like, oh my God, please don't sue me, anybody. But that was what people were calling my Easter eggs. Were like, oh my God, I'm looking for people's names in here, like people that I know. So people who I know. But I love that. And your Miss Subways too. What is your favorite comment? And can you tell your readers who haven't read the Subway Girls yet, although of course you should have, but you can give us to your TBR. Can you give us the thumbnail on this book?
Yeah, so the Subway Girls is based on the actual Miss Subways contest, which ran from 1941 to 1976 in the New York City subway system. And it was basically a beauty pageant. And this is, I'm my thing's backwards, so that's why it doesn't look like I'm able to point to the right things. This is Mary Gardner. She's the one who is on my Facebook page today, and who is in We Came Here to Shine. So Yeah, so this was a beauty pageant in the subway system, and I found out about this on NPR and thought it was fascinating because as soon as I heard about this program, I wanted to find out the stories of these women. Who were they? What compelled them to enter the contest? What was it like to win? And how did that affect the rest of their lives? So I learned all about it. This one is dual storyline. It follows a young woman in 1949 who's competing for the Miss Subways contest, and it follows a modern day female advertising executive who's pitching the MTA account, which is a Subways account, and comes across the Miss Subways contest in her research. And the two storylines end up intersecting. So this is also, I think what's different about my books is that they are light historical fiction. They are historical fiction in that they are focused on a slice of life of history, but they're uplifting. They're not about wars, and they're really the stories of strong and ambitious women in an historical setting. So I think readers have really responded to that in that they feel like it's a I don't want to say light because I don't mean silly. I just mean light in that it's not heavy.
It's not devastating.
No.
Right. I mean, I write all the devastating stuff where I'm like going to take you into the mines and like hold you down underwater. And our on-air host today, Jenna Blum, has said to me, like, what I can deal with in your books is that everything is glamorous too. I like a little glamour with my devastation, but
I love that.
I provide both of those things. I know she's so amazing. I try to provide both of those things, but I think that also, especially in a time when our lives are at this incredible, like an extraordinary historical moment. And as a historical novelist, I'm sure you feel this. I feel it too. Like I'm sort of excruciatingly aware of being a hostage to history. I have been aware of it since 2016, and then I have been aware of it during the pandemic, and now during this sort of the anti-racism convulsions of the country. And I think World War II books are so popular, or were so popular right before the pandemic, and now I think people really need to know what's happening, but they also want to be uplifted. And so what you're doing with your fiction is shining a light, like appropriately enough, on women's roles that were not highlighted before, and that gives readers some courage and some strength. And I feel as though your books also provide models for us to look at now and say, well, people lived through these dark times and they still did it in a hopeful and optimistic and gritty way. And so, and with glamour. So you provide some glamour with your history. And that is, I think, a very nourishing thing to read at this point. So I don't think of it as like light as in L-I-T-E, like, you know, and cheese kind of reading. Like, I think it's just like, it's not going to make you weep like the rest of the world is right now.
It is an escape. Yeah.
Yes, we need some rabbit holes right now, and we need rabbit holes to history. I wonder, and this is a question from a reader too, so I'm going to jump on this right now. Do you consider writing genres out? Well, I know you've written nonfiction, but would you step out of historical fiction into contemporary fiction or a different genre of fiction?
So I haven't written nonfiction. The On Grace and the Balance Project, which are, I don't know where On Grace is, but this is the Balance Project. They're both contemporary fiction. So the Balance Project interviews were nonfiction, but they inspired, it's okay. They inspired this, which is a novel about work-life balance from the perspective of two women, one a 25-year-old and one her 45-year-old boss. But you know, to answer that, so yes, I've written contemporary fiction and I've written historical fiction. And somebody said, well, why did you switch genres? And it was less that I was trying to jump genres and more that the story I wanted to tell happened to happen in the past. So that was an interesting way to look at it. I think I might want to write what I'm calling domestic speculative fiction. So
what is it? Did you just invent a genre right now?
I might have.
Right there?
So speculative fiction, for those who don't know, is kind of, how would you describe it? It's not really science fiction. It's kind of like The Circle or The Farm. It's like The Handmaid's Tale, but not as devastating, not as extreme. It's like imagining our world differently.
Like a little bit surreal, like recognizable, but surreal.
Yeah, so it's not dystopian like The Hunger Games, but it's like imagining something if, like I just read the premise of one book where men live on one island and women live on another island. So that's kind of dystopian, speculative, whatever. But I want to write more of the domestic speculative, which I think The Farm by Joanne Ramos might be a perfect example, is where women were farmed as surrogates for rich women. So poor women were surrogate carried babies for rich women, and it was kind of about that experience. And I have two ideas that I've been percolating for almost a year now about these two domestic speculative stories that I want to tell.
Tell us.
I don't know. I mean, right now I am working on launching my book. I am working on being an anti-racist by reading and learning, and hopefully going to be working on campaigning for the election. And then I will start writing my next book.
So you just got to get all that, fix the world, and then
Fix
go
the
on to
world, check.
right?
Write the next book.
That would be so nice. That would be so nice. I mean, talk about balance, right? This is another thing that occurred to me while we were talking about the Balance Project and the interviews that you did for that there was this big, it's almost like I envision my life sometimes as like a room that has a lot of big pieces of furniture in it. And with political activism, somebody shoved this big piece of furniture in the room. And I'm like, I don't know where to put this, but it's like something that I really need to figure out where to put. I'm not going to shove it back out of the room. It's important. So how do you envision balancing this? I mean, you're launching a brand new baby, not only in the age of COVID, but now in the age of, again, this sort of convulsive civil awareness that I think is so necessary. Like how do you balance this in your day?
Well, I think to recognize that I have the privilege, obviously, of being able to compartmentalize, that I'm able to launch this book, and that I'm able to get a publishing contract and an agent. And obviously, we all know now the reckoning going on in publishing, which is important and necessary. And I think, I'm trying to stay, that's a very hard question to answer. I not hard question to answer, but a hard question to articulate, hard answer to articulate, that I want to stay cognizant of what's going on in our world around us, while also not while not saying that what this is to me today is also not important. They can both be important. And I think that anybody who is out there being an activist might give me the grace to celebrate the work that I have done on launch day, and for the, while also being aware and doing what I can do. You know what I mean?
I do. It's a hard thing to talk about. It was hard. I mean, this is why we started The Blaze, because when COVID became such a dire threat to people and placed an inflection point on people's lives, we were saying, like, are books, even important when we're facing a sort of mortal opponent? And my dander went up, because I thought, I know my friends work for 3, 5, 10 years on books, and hearing you talk about your research, like, I know readers are so respectful of all the work authors do, but it really is like a totally immersive process that we do for years and years. And our reward is this day that Susie is having. You launch your book and you get to meet readers normally. And I just thought, I'm just not going to let that not happen. Like, we can't let the books fall down the well. But now I think it's a little bit different. Like, we've had to pivot very rapidly into thinking like, okay, my book is still important even though there's COVID. Is my book still important even though I'm now suddenly, or maybe not suddenly, but I'm now hyper conscious of the fact that the book is born of a privileged position of writing a book, right? Or having the book come out. So yes, we struggle with this. And I think the struggle is the point in a lot of books.
And it's also hard when you've got a bunch of white ladies frolicking around in a pool to post that all over the place, which I'm doing today, recognizing what's going on outside. So I'm trying to be thoughtful, but also embracing the and, not the or.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I totally get that. And of course, I mean, duh, like, I think about this all the time. Like, I post pictures of the puppy and people are like, oh, please post pictures of the puppy. Like, I'm dying in despair, like, post it. And then I do. And then I'm like, but Atlanta, like, it's just, it's a very hard time. But I think that me being conscious of the fact that it's a hard time is nothing compared to other people's hard times.
Right.
So
and to say how appreciative for all the people who are doing the work and the protests and really changing our country right now. And it's embarrassing to be somebody who hasn't done that work before. You know what I mean? I'm ashamed for our country and for any role, that I've played in it. But I'm reading White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo right now, and I cannot recommend that book enough. It is so amazing. So I highly recommend. And there's a movement going on right now in the publishing world for everybody to buy 2 books this week by Black authors.
Yes.
Because last week the bestseller list was, I don't know if it was entirely Black authors, but the goal is to make this week all Black authors on the bestseller list. So great opportunity. And can I give a shout out for the bookstore that I'm hoping people
please
buy White Fragility or any other books, or We Came Here to Shine. So there's a bookstore called the Lit Bar in the Bronx. It's the only bookstore in the Bronx, and it is owned by a Black woman, and she has a shop on bookshop.org. So if you go onto Bookshop, you can either go onto the Lit Bar, her website, or if you go onto bookshop.org and you type in the Lit Bar under search for shops, there you can find all sorts of books. And she's got a great list of anti-racist books right now on her website.
I'm so glad. And thank you for talking candidly about this. It's such an important conversation to have. And I think just to not talk about it is it's so important. And I love that you gave a shout out to the Lit Bar and that the Lit Bar is in the Bronx. And also Bookshop, which keeps indie bookstores afloat. We are partnered with them. And so we're, every book that you buy on Bookshop, you're supporting not only that bookstore itself, but other independent bookstores as sort of co-op. So
yeah, and they were so smart.
All the good.
They have the counter at top that says how much money they've been giving to local bookstores through their sales. And it's over $3 million right now. And you see, like, as you're checking out, the number goes up and you're like, I did that. So it's really, really great.
It feels good to do a little bit of something. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my frivolous ask self and ask about the wallpaper in your study, which I'm in.
I don't know who the manufacturer is because this got put in like 5 years ago, and I don't know who the manufacturer. I will find out. But yes, it makes me so happy. And I live with 4 males. I have a husband and 3 boys, and they hate this wallpaper and they hate this room. And which I'm like, fine, stay out. Like,
good, right? It's like the allergy room for men. So you're like, you have a she cave.
A what?
A she cave.
Yes, a she. Yeah, I call it my she shed. But it's filled with books and all sorts of fun things in here. But this is where I work in complete quiet. I can't have music on or anything. So.
Have you trained them to keep out? So it's like the clubhouse that says girls keep out, except it's boys keep out.
They don't really want to come in. I mean,
they might get estrogen from like the stamens and the poppies.
Yeah, I mean, they're busy with their things. It's so different when not having little kids. So
they'll just go off and man around, and you just go into your she shed and produce beautiful books. We had a reader ask about the books on your shelf as well, and are they organized by color?
Yeah, so and let me see. I'm sure the Lost Family. What color is your jacket?
It's red, honey.
Where is it?
It's red.
Oh, I have Those Who Save Us right here.
Oh, thank you,
my baby. I don't know where my Lost Family is. I have stacks everywhere. So this is just like books I've recently read. I have a whole other, like in my husband's office downstairs, our main bookshelf. So this is just some books that are keeping. Then I have a whole row up there of books that are like my to be read thing. And then there's a third row up there of other books that are to be read. And then I have stacks over here of like books that I'm reading next. And then I have like my stack right here of the books I'm reading next. So, well, not this one, I already read it. But anyway, books are everywhere. They're everywhere. I'm sure in your house too. But yeah, just that row is organized by color, which I did. But now I kind of don't like it because I can't find books.
Yeah, all my books are alphabetized in this neurotic way, but at least I know where everything is. And I have like a secret system where I'm like, research is over here, nonfiction is here, then you have the fiction, and then I have like my ego wall, whatever. But yeah, I'm in my Minnesota house, so it looks like I have no books, that I'm just sitting in a neat, clean looking room as opposed to the other rooms where the books are. Oh my gosh, so exciting. Thank you. And do you have, I should probably let you go because it's your pub day and I could sit here and chat at you forever.
Okay. I'm happy here.
Okay. So domestic speculative fiction is maybe coming up next after you fix the world. So if you could please get on that and then write the next book, that would be fabulous. If you had one thing to say to your readers who are watching right now about We Came Here to Shine, like what do you want them to feel as they read the book and then maybe to take away from the book?
So I want them to, I think my kind of overarching philosophy right now is that women need to use their voices. And that thematically is very intertwined in the story. My characters both learn to use their voices either for the first time or in a more effective way. It's something that I'm learning to do more and more the older that I get. And I also layer in a character and a storyline about the National Women's Party, which was an organization back in the beginning of the 20th century that did activism for women when that wasn't really a thing, you know? So, and my characters kind of respond to a woman who is representative of the National Women's Party. So that's kind of tied in, and kind of how they initiate conversations about breaking out of these strictures and the constraints put upon them. So I guess my takeaway is that I want women to do things that light them up. I want them to continue becoming, you know, like Michelle Obama. Becoming is such a great word. Like, we're not done. And it is incumbent upon ourselves to continue to do things in our lives that light us up. And if we are not doing that, we are shortchanging ourselves on the potential that we all have as women to do the things that make us uncomfortable and do the things that light us up. And when we can do that, when we A, figure out what that is, and B, get rid of the things in our lives that are telling us that we can't do that, and create the space and stop doing the unimportant things to make the time to do the things that light us up, then imagine what this world will become. So that's the takeaway. And
Go ahead.
Good.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, there's nothing that anybody could say that could be better than that right now. That was so amazing. Thank you. I was just kind of like, oh, I'm in awe of that. That was amazing. So yeah, but then I cut you off and you might have been about to say.
The only thing I was going to say was that I also recommend this book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I just finished listening to it, and then I bought it also because now I have to go back and highlight it. This book spoke to me like very few books have, and just about finding the cheetah within each of us. And I recommend this too, because it's also about throwing off, you know, getting rid of the memo that we've all been sent about who we're supposed to be and questioning everything. So.
Okay, now I'm waiting. I'm like, I know there's more wisdom coming if I just.
There's so much more, but I think that that's enough. It's enough.
enough wisdom for one day. Like, there's only so much my puny brain can take in one day, but both of those sort of takeaway statements are so fantastic. And I'm glad that you recommend Untamed. I'm glad you recommended Becoming. I'm glad you recommended White Fragility. Thank you so much for lighting us up today. Like, I feel personally nourished and happier for having had this conversation and to let some air into what is a restrictive and constricting time emotionally in many ways for all of us. We have to keep talking, and thank you for giving us something that is a delight to read. So everybody, buy We Came Here to Shine. Buy it from the Lit Bar, buy it from Bookshop, buy it anywhere, but just buy it and read it. You will be happier. So
thank you, Jenna. You are a true friend and supporter of authors, and I'm just so grateful that you and A Mighty Blaze invited me to come here today. So thank you.
No, thanks for spending part of your pub day with us. We could just do like the thank yous back and forth now for like an hour. We'll just do that.